Scott County, providing safe, healthy, and livable communities.
I am. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We are here this morning with a pretty large group of people, actually, a broad base of county and community folks who have all been working on early learning and towards the county's goal that all children have the opportunity for healthy and successful lives. And certainly supporting early learning opportunities advances that goal. But our focus this morning is on one specific board strategy, and that is the outreach program to support early learning for children and increase the capacity for their parents. And so one of the most concrete examples of that is the Reid Mobile, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that program this morning, some of the strengths and some of the gaps and next steps. But we also want to talk about the broader collective impact and the people across the county that are working towards those bigger goals: timely high school graduations, reading at third grade levels, employability, those kinds of things. And so we're going to hear how the data reflects the work that those programs are doing towards the bigger goal. So with that, I think we'll start with some introductions of the panel and the presenters. I do want to note, Mayor Briggs is here, and he's, I think, our first elected official at a Scott County Delivers, I believe. So we're grateful for all the community partners, but specifically for the mayor being with us this morning. So we're going to ask for some introductory comments from Jake and from Mayor Briggs, and then we'll start with the data. I'm Chris Harder. I'm the Quality Improvement Manager here at Scott County.
I'm Danny Lenz. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Scott County.
I'm Lori Huss. I'm the Employee Relations Director.
Jake Grusing. I'm the County Library Director.
I'm Mary Kay Stevens with Scott County Public Health and Maternal Child Health Program Coordinator.
I'm Cammie Thompson. I'm the Center Director for New Horizon Academy in Shakopee and the co-chair of the Kid Educational Preparedness Group with Live, Learn, Earn.
I'm Allie Addison. I'm a Learning and Outreach Specialist for Scott County Libraries, and I design and implement programming on the Reid Mobile.
I'm Allison Ronda, licensing.
All right, Jake, would you like to start?
I would. Thank you.
Thank you.
As Chris said, we will start with this broader long-term objective, and I think probably weave in and out of the two shorter-term strategies. And I'll apologize, it's on me that a couple of our external partner guests, Kathy and Kim, aren't here yet. I gave them the start time of 9:30 to 9:45. Not sure exactly how quickly we'd move through the rest of the agenda, so I'm hoping they'll be able to join us as they're able. So in 2016, Scott County adopted this long-term objective for early childhood development, and it was written as an outcome: all children have the opportunity for a healthy and successful life. As I was thinking about what I was going to be saying this morning during this portion of the presentation, I found myself reflecting on how big that objective really is if we take it seriously, especially the part that says all children. I have two kids. One was carried to term, was born healthy, and he hit all the developmental milestones, and up to this point, everything has come quickly and easily for him. The other child was born prematurely. She spent a month in the NICU. She was diagnosed with mild cerebral palsy, and up to this point has struggled in a number of ways. But the same parents, same household environment, and two very different kids who have required vastly different levels of support to have that same opportunity for a healthy and successful life. So that's what was sort of going through my head this morning, was if we take that all kids seriously, and I suspect there are other people in the audience who have, if you have one or more children, they all have different needs and different supports that are necessary. So every child is different. I mean, that's an obvious kind of thing to say, and I think it's so obvious that we don't say it that often. But to me, it is worth saying that every child is different and requires different levels of support throughout his or her development. So achieving this goal of giving children the opportunity for a healthy and successful life is challenging enough when the number of children is 2 and they live in your own home. But there are about 10,000 kids ages 5 and under in Scott County. Some of them need stable housing, some of them need food on the table, some of them need health care, some of them need special education, some need more books in the home, some just need a little more time with mom and dad, and some need all of the above. So what do we do to ensure that we achieve that objective of all children, and truly all children, have the opportunity for a healthy and successful life? Fortunately, the board had the foresight, I think, to write that objective as an outcome that county government couldn't achieve on its own. We are forced to partner. We're forced to look outside our county programs. And that makes the work of achieving that outcome very challenging and I think very exciting and educational, if I speak for myself. So the group of people before you today came together because of their mutual dedication to creating an early childhood system that listens to families, that engages families as partners and leaders, and that helps children live successful and healthy lives. One of the more remarkable things, so these Scott Delivers groups typically meet 3, 4, 5 times before they wind up here. This group was able to agree, despite coming from different programs, from different departments, from different organizations, that we're all pursuing the same outcome, but we're doing different things to achieve it. And I think that's why this is a larger than usual group, and that is why it could be much, much larger. I think this is just a fraction of the number of people and programs that could be represented in the room. There are so many people and programs holding pieces of this early childhood puzzle, and I think we're still learning who is holding which piece and how they all fit together. And one of the things that struck me in the preparation was that we met, I think, 3 or 4 times. I didn't hear anybody ever say there aren't enough pieces in the box. We don't have enough pieces of the puzzle to do this. I think there was general consensus that there are enough programs out there, and really solid programs out there, that we can achieve that goal. We can ensure that all children have the opportunity for a healthy and successful life. It's not going to take a brand new department or a $1 million program. I think if we can coordinate existing programs, reduce barriers to access, do some data sharing, and really listen to families and engage them as partners and leaders in this work, we'll be able to get to that point. That said, I don't want that to sound like I'm overselling the work that we've done, and we're almost there. I think we're still very much at the beginning and bringing these people to the table, but we're working, I think, and thinking within a shared context, and that will only strengthen the work we do going forward. So we're here today for sort of what I think of as like an annual checkup. Go through the data, have this group ask us some good questions, have the audience and then the board members ask us some good questions and maybe provide some direction as well. With that, I'll turn it over. I think Mayor Briggs was, Chris, yes. Thank you for telling him he was going to say something. I think that's helped. I look here. Yeah.
Is it time, Jake?
Go for it, yeah.
Like a rubber band on there.
Yeah, can I come up? I'm not Kathy Bush. Yeah. Chairman Wolf, Commissioner Beer, Commissioner Brecke. It's a pleasure to be before you. I have the honor of, having been the co-chair of the educational prep team with this child care professional to my left, Cammie Thompson. And what I wanted to share is, of course, children are our tomorrow. And when we look at the various comorbidities or cofactors that can conspire against academic preparedness in our children, there are a number of things. We, as a group, as our Live, Learn, Earn subcommittee, looked at a number of those factors, certainly nutrition, socio status, English as a second language, household trauma. There are a number of factors, and we as a group, in looking at all of the data, we're faced with the daunting task of saying what, and of course the most difficult step to take is the very first one in any adventure. In your packets, in the packet that is here, I believe slide 5 is one that for us became very important. So what is that? There we are. Not that. There we are. Page 5, slide 6. So we had the daunting task of what is the best first place for us to start as a subcommittee to bring a meaningful difference to academic preparedness, make a change that could positively influence third grade reading scores. And of course, third grade reading scores, I won't quote statistics, but I'm sure if we were to walk across the street and our residents across in the county facility, many of those residents, unfortunately, did not have the academic preparedness. And we as a county, we as a state, right, in failing potentially those learners are now in a very difficult place of playing catch-up. Well, you can't play catch-up when the vast majority of brain development happens before 3 years of age. So what is the slide before you? The slide before you are the school districts in Scott County. And what you see there is when we look at early childhood screening for academic preparedness, which is that important step where professionals can identify what potentially are the needs of these children that could be tended to prior to kindergarten. Or as we learned, if nothing else, no kindergarten surprises. Upwards of 15% of the kids arrive on that first day of kindergarten unknown or unbeknownst to the school that they were in the district for a whole host of reasons. So there is a vast array and difference between when that screening is accomplished. The more green you see, the better. So I would say Belle Plaine is getting to a large fraction of their children before or at the age of 3 years of age, which provides 2 years should additional referral needs be identified for that child to undertake that work prior to kindergarten. So if what we could do as a group here in Scott County was to enhance the awareness to what is childhood screening, to what we could do to elevate the bar, to turn these stacked bars to the best of our ability green and rid the county of red, we would be doing a good thing. And so what we did as a team is in discussing this, we came up with a flyer, an educational flyer, of which I'm going to say 4 languages, Spanish, English, Russian, and Somali, that identifies the school districts for parents and for grandparents and in our child care facilities are for parents and care providers to understand it's important that they get their child screened. And those flyers were distributed we began distributing them, I want to say approximately 3 months ago. And as a team now, I would say we have made that first important step to changing what this picture looks like. And certainly I'm hopeful that when we're together, if the opportunity presents next year, that this is going to look largely green with the remaining space being yellow. But again, it's been my pleasure to be part of this, knowing we've got quite a long way to go, and yet it makes a meaningful difference long-term for our residents in Scott County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for launching us right into the discussion. That was nice. I appreciate that. Could we start with this slide? And I just wanted to ask, looking at the differences across Scott County, what do we know, and I'm not sure who the best person is to direct this question to, but what do we know about the differences in those school districts? Like why are there those differences in the rates of screening?
Can I ask something quick?
Sure.
I think it was 2 weeks ago I was asking at the board, there was all these diseases, cancer, heart, what made people die. And then I can't remember who it was, if it was Lisa, but she said, well, these aren't the worst things, it's poverty that's the worst disease. And I wonder, is that got something to do with this?
It does, and we're actually going to talk about that in a minute, and that's an excellent point.
Okay.
So, Chris, in terms of the underlying, why do these stack bars look so different? That question, quite honestly, is still a bit elusive for us. But seeing that there are rather striking differences suggests, one of the things that I, was pushing for is if we can look for what's called a positive deviancy in any population. What's a positive deviancy? I would say Belle Plaine, if I may, is a positive deviant here. They are performing, if we believe that screening by age 3 is more advantageous than screening at 4 and 5, and I happen to believe it is, there is something going on in Belle Plaine that for us to potentially dissect that positive deviancy. So although we may not know what the best practice is that's underway, if indeed it is a best practice, But dissecting that positive deviant, I would argue, puts us on a path for identifying those pieces that we may want to emulate, duplicate, repeat in the other districts.
Yes, thank you.
And I do think that, go ahead. I do think that we have had meetings with school districts and had discussions about what they're doing, and those conversations are still going to continue, which I think we'll continue to learn from. I think some of the challenges that some of the districts are dealing with are people moving in and out of the district too, so some of those districts may just be dealing with more people moving in and out of that area than some other cities maybe as well too, so.
Okay.
We have Kim Laturner here now.
Kim, too.
Shakopee Schools. I would have to agree. I don't want to sit up there. I would have to agree. I think it is the mobility of families at this age. I'd have to say it's poverty, and I'd have to say it's some other barriers like transportation. Another one would be a misconception about what early childhood screening is, and a parent's concern or fear that my child will do better at 4. So it's how we communicate and market and inform the public that it's not a scary process. It definitely in Shakopee is a language barrier for many of our families, and I think Shakopee has a real diverse community, and so just families not really understanding what early childhood is. So it's not one factor, but I think we did have Belle Plaine come and speak to us as a group, and they had some really nice strategies, and I think that's what we're moving towards right now, especially oh, I do have a name. Especially working all together and seeing that this is a target area where we can catch kids right away. So public health working together, the private sector, the public sector, and those sorts of things.
Thanks, Kim. Can I take a minute to just invite the panel for questions? Do you want to start with the...
Sure. I'd like to go back to maybe where Jake started. I thought you spoke eloquently about the broad, how vast this is. So when I read through the packet, the objective and strategy, it's very multi-pronged. You've got kids healthy and successful, kids prepared for school, and programs targeting kids and caregivers. So across all of these things, how are you initially finding common ground to make some progress? What have you found in your initial meeting?
Well, from my perspective, as not one of the boots on the ground people, I think I actually probably have the easiest job in terms of saying the common ground is everybody here, everybody around the table, and some folks who aren't are working toward that same objective, that we're all working for the families and the children in Scott County. And it might be you have a program objective that has a pretty narrow metric that we're trying to achieve this very specific result, but that program falls into this broader system of early childhood development, so that it is broad, and that's the common ground we have, is that we're all working within childhood development and trying to understand the connections. But I would certainly ask anybody else at the table to expand on that and improve upon it.
Well, I think that's what makes this so much fun. It's not an easy fix. There's so many factors for children being successful, and it's more about all of us working together to meet those needs and realizing that basic needs need to be met first. So I think we all agree in that, and what we can do to try to figure out what the risk factors are for children and how we can work together as a whole group to create systems that will help them be successful. So that's what makes it a little difficult with our group, or maybe fun, challenging, is that we can't just look at one aspect of something. There's going to be multiple layers that we're going to have to work on together to kind of meet the needs of all children and all families. So,
to follow up on that question, and finding the common ground, are we looking at all of our programs and the various interventions we have here and tracking those kids to see if they're being screened by age 3 and eventually reading at third grade level and saying, yes, we are all going to track this so we know whether these interventions are having the appropriate impact?
I would say we don't have a common system because we all have different methods and different ways of tracking our families. Some have more secure information. There's MARS numbers that are assigned in some of our programs. We don't even have the same common language. So even trying to develop, when we're having conversations, we're trying to find where our programs overlap. But right now, the biggest gap I think that we're seeing is we don't provide a common language or a common tool to see how these families are being assisted through Scott County Public Health, Scott County Child Care Licensing, Scott County Libraries, and even our school districts. There isn't a common tool that we have to share data, so. And
that was part of one of my questions was the data sharing, but is there a commitment that, yes, these are our metrics that we want to have this screen at 3 and try and achieve the third grade reading level, and saying we're all going to track that even if we can't share the data yet, but that is the goal that we're trying to track? Is that common goal been established that, yes, we're all going to work in that direction?
From my perspective, I would say, yeah, that's a common goal. And I think when you have as many people at the table as we do, that would probably be followed by a but. It's a common goal, but
yes.
Screening only tells you so much, kindergarten readiness only tells you so much, third grade reading only tells you so much, and even graduation rates only tell you so much. So in Scott County, graduation rates are going up, but as I think the board has heard at community health board meetings and in other Scott County Deliver sessions, there are concerns around suicide rates and opioid use. So that's the standardized test achievement or a snapshot in time of graduation is one thing. What this group, I think, rightly always comes back to is, yep, third grade reading is an important indicator, and it's one that's pretty easy for us to get. But that does not tell us the whole story about that child, and getting screened at 3 doesn't tell us the whole story of that child or his or her family.
It's a common benchmark that's used, is kind of what we say. It's an easy way for us to be able to determine their ability for success down the road, and it's something that everybody uses at this point. But our goal definitely is to reach children at a younger age, because we can have a larger impact on them if we can reach them younger. So,
when you think about all the data that's in the packet, or maybe data that's not, are there, like, what would be the top 3 sort of measures that would really help tell the story around kids' sort of quality of life and educational readiness?
I think that something that's really important, besides the screening at an early age, is parental involvement. It's maybe a little bit difficult to measure. I don't think that we've talked about that as far as a measuring tool, but I think that would be a goal of all of us and all of our programs is, you know, it's a partnership. It's not that there's agencies, school districts, or organizations that are doing these things just for the children, but I think we're really trying to engage parents to do the right thing to make their children be the most successful they can be. So I think for us to talk about a way to measure parent involvement might be, you know, a good next step, but sure, I don't know what that is at this point.
And I would just add on that, I feel that information is more qualitative than quantitative, and so how do we assess those qualitative moments across agencies is something that we do need to look as a next step, so.
I think preschool screening it can be a very powerful tool because it can give you an overall assessment of where that child is at. So I think that using preschool screening is one of the ways that the county can kind of determine children's and families' needs is a good tool for us to kind of work with as well.
It's a gateway. Yeah. You know, it's not just screen to screen and have it done, but it's screened and then now what's appropriate. And I think somebody mentioned sometimes it's a challenge after screening. Kim was mentioning some parents are hesitant to have their child screened because I think some parents are afraid of my child is now labeled as a child with special needs, and that label will never go away. And you know, that's based on their own experience as a child and what they went through. So I work in the Head Start program, and it can be a challenge to convince some of the parents that yep, you should do the screening at a young age. And then the second challenge comes with, now my child was screened, and there's a few concerns, or we feel like it would be helpful to that child to maybe be assessed by, at another step, and a parent has a right to say no. We can screen all we want, but then it's the parent's choice at the preschool age to move ahead with any further assessment.
Are there ways through the district to, and I know as part of the Ed Prep group, we've talked about this a bit, for the kids where there's needs identified at the point of screening, to be able to track, are their needs met, or what are the barriers? Is it about a parent who declines? But how do we track those kids where needs have been identified?
At the exit piece of the screening, for sure, if there needs to be a referral, or if they need to be connected to another resource, or those kinds of things, it does happen at that point, at that exit interview. But if the parent chooses to do those things, and it's really the parent's lead, so that's some things we can look in screening too. Can we help move that parent along, setting up additional meetings, or helping the parent make the phone call, or whatever it may be. But it is the parent's choice at that time, and then we don't have any way to track it. We can track that we made the referral to here or there, but then it kind of stops.
Well, I think that's where the data sharing would be helpful, because we can understand then better if this intervention that we applied actually caused them to get the resources, which is really the critical component of doing that screening.
Can we turn to page 18 for just a minute? That is the third grade reading level slide. And if you look at that, Scott County is performing better, higher rates of reading at third grade level than the state. But it's still like, whenever I look at this data, I just think, really, in Minnesota? Like, how is this? I'm wondering if your work groups or your programs have been in touch with other jurisdictions in Minnesota that are looking at this and are also worried about it. Like, are there other places that are working towards our same goals?
Yeah, I'll jump in and say yes.
Okay.
There are other jurisdictions, and I think almost every other jurisdiction either has been working on this for a while, because it's been a long-standing issue, or they're starting to figure out that this has been an issue in their community for a long time, and that I don't think there are communities around the state that are immune to it. So Scott County, as we hear so often, has so much going for it. It's I think still the fastest growing county in the state. It's a relatively affluent county. But even here, I think we're probably one of the higher achieving counties in the state, and we're not that far above the state average. So I believe this is an issue everywhere. One of our neighboring counties, Dakota, has been working on a birth date initiative for quite a while, I think 2 or 3 years, trying to get to a point where they can really share and integrate data and assign that MARS number to get to some of the questions that have been asked so far. When, let's say, somebody at a WIC visit has a first encounter with a parent and a child who's 3 months old, assign the unique identifier at that point so that we can track that child throughout all the programs and eventually learn what's working and what isn't working. If we're doing something that we can show isn't making any difference, we should have some serious conversations about whether we continue to do that. Minneapolis, the Northside Achievement Zone, the St. Paul Promise neighborhood, RT Ryback was down for our Live, Learn, Earn retreat a few weeks ago. Generation Next is a project in Minneapolis and Hennepin County that's focused on birth to kindergarten and really trying to drive that third grade reading rate up. So to me, it seems like everybody's working on it and trying to figure it out. I don't know if anybody would care to comment on what you've learned or heard from other jurisdictions, other organizations that are working on it.
I guess, Jake, I'd just like to say, and Danny, you touched on it, I think data sharing holds the greatest promise to unlocking data sharing between departmental areas, districts, county, city. many of these children, it's just identifying where they are. So as Jake shared, Dakota County came in, presented to us, we learned what they have going as it relates to data sharing. Certainly there are some encumbrances for certain types of data, HIPAA preclusions from data being shared. But I think that's something we need to continue to push ourselves to find ways to exchange that data in order to influence these numbers. I guess the other thing I'd like to say is a word that I try not to use is the word easy. It only works with the easy button at Staples or wherever it is. These are really complex, multifactorial issues. And when we look at metrics, to me, oftentimes we're looking at surrogates. We're looking at surrogates or intermediate stop points, which is why it's challenging to come up with them. But I'm glad, certainly this slide here causes me significant problems and a lot of free-floating anxiety when we think these are our leaders of tomorrow and this is the preparation we're providing for them in the future. So this should be a very uncomfortable slide for all of us.
I wonder if I could just ask one follow-up question. So Chairman Wolf noted the poverty factor. What else do we know about the kids who are not achieving reading at 3rd grade? What else do we know about those kids?
I think from our aspect, we're really looking at early childhood development prenatally up. That's a snapshot of how a kid performed at a certain time. When we think of early childhood, really we're thinking about the family. The family is the one that is, the parent is the first educator of that child. That's prenatally up to before you go to kindergarten, a lot of impact. And so poverty plays into it, homelessness, mental illness, I think just a language barrier. Many of these kids who are not achieving are performing at a higher rate than their parent. And so we're looking at these comprehensive services to support families at this early age. But as they grow, some of those comprehensive services just kind of go away. And so it's all about the instruction of the student and then their performance on what they've taken in. And I am really a strong advocate of maintaining the services and support for families all the way through. And I think districts, we kind of fall off because we're so focused on the academics. And if you can't support your student in their homework or understand how to use the iPad or those kinds of things, that halts some of that progress that a student can make in the home. And so comprehensive services, I think, are really important.
When school districts look at test results like 3rd grade reading level and how those look, and I was on the Shakopee School Board for 20 years, so I'm familiar with this. The scores will also be broken down as far as mobility. You know, the children and their scores, have they moved frequently? Have they moved within the last year? Are they going from school to school? The language of the family, as Kim mentioned, the socioeconomic level, the poverty rate. And so then when those scores are looked at, if you take out any of those components and you separate them, you're going to maybe see different things, and that's going to help whatever entity is trying to help these students and families. But then a school district may provide, or other entities may provide resources to help those where, if there's a group that's targeted because those scores are particularly low, let's say the poverty, well, or the language, versus the language, there's cultural liaisons in many of the school districts, and they will go actually into the homes and work with the families, or they will support the families by coming to conferences or getting, helping the family with real basic needs, like maybe a winter jacket for their child. I mean, if those basic needs aren't met, it's hard to be really focused on these test scores. But you know, we would see different results if we broke those groups out.
Sure.
And we would see differences from school district to school district too. But I think that districts are tuned in to putting resources there, and and some of us are too, in the work we do.
I guess one of the factors that we learned that, again, the various comorbidities, well, the presence or absence of Wi-Fi in the household. You know, Wi-Fi deserts. You know, we, as a matter of fact, a city council meeting last night, a gentleman came before us, challenges in the city of Prior Lake, fairly affluent area, with his current internet provider. And for his work, he asked his daughters to get off the Wi-Fi from doing their homework so he can go ahead and Skype in to work for a con call. So I use that as an extreme example, even where you think you've got presence. And we would hear stories of households that don't have Wi-Fi, that the family would need to pick up, including the kids, go to a library, go to a go to a Caribou, such that I can get online. And as we know, more and more of our curricula as we move forward will be internet-based content. So one of the items that I think also conspires here in the background is technology and Wi-Fi access to these households, because if you don't have the tools in order to prepare yourself, you're going to get left behind. So I think it's a key issue as well.
I think another factor that we see that influences it, and thinking about from the early on, there have been studies that talk about the number of words kids have at 2 and how that relates to third grade reading level, and postpartum depression and how that impacts third grade reading level. So thinking about how are families doing early on, what are the stressors, are they worried about the basic needs, like you said, what else is going on in the home that makes that parent perhaps not available or not able to support that child ideally in their social and emotional growth or their development, or they're just too stressed or having their own challenges. So we definitely have to have a multi-generational approach, I think, to make a difference and make sure that parents are well supported and doing okay to be able to be available to give their kids what they need.
One of the things that was, I think, exciting to me, the more that we started diving really into what we were looking at, we definitely all agree that children's basic needs need to be met first so they feel secure enough to be able to be curious and excited about learning. But we've kind of said the whole time it's not about like reinventing the wheel. All of these things are already within our county. We just have to kind of figure out how to get that message out and educate the public and support each other in having all of that information in one place that is accessible to easily accessible to people. So we're not really trying to create something new. We're just trying to unify and educate, basically, and support families so they can get those needs met to be successful later on down the road. So,
thank you all.
With that said, I wondered, you went right to one. I was super excited about page 7. So when you're talking about making this visible to those of us who may not be kind of connected to this world, this to me was a perfect place. So I was wondering if your conversation was anything around, could this be an educational piece to caregivers about what's out there and available to support me as a caregiver? So did you have any discussions on that, or how do you see this being used? Because I was excited when I saw this, like, wow, there's a lot going on.
I will say we didn't have a conversation about making this an educational piece for caregivers.
Okay.
But I don't think anybody would think that that's a bad idea. I think part of the issue, as Cammie articulated and others, is that we still, as a system, don't know what's within our system. We don't have a good understanding and awareness of who's doing what and which programs are available, who's eligible for those programs, what data does that program collect, what resources does that program or department have. So this is a good starting point, but I'm glad to hear that you were excited about it.
I think that in my own personal experience, I am who I am now because of the education that my company has given me about early childhood. It's very exciting to me that I've had those opportunities, and any of us who work in childcare, we're required to do in-service training, and I fully support that. I think that's very important in our field, and I think that hopefully having the opportunity to be able to continue to educate providers, I think, is critical, so they really realize the impact that they do have on children and families. So I think, yeah, that's very important that we take a look at how we can support any providers in understanding what they really do with children when they're in their care is important, so.
If I could just add, I think one of the things I've been most excited about in our early childhood work is that as Jake said, everybody brings a kind of a different piece to the continuum, but that we really are working hard to strengthen the continuum that we have in place and to get organized. And we know about each other, but we're really deepening the way that we collaborate and make that accessible for families and get the word out, which is really exciting. And I think we have to, at least in public health, we have accountability at a federal and a state level about having a coordinated early childhood system. So we know we have sort of one niche and one piece, and we want to help connect families to those other things they need so that we create a really nice, supportive
kind of this deep linear approach. So when families move into the county, whatever avenue they connect with, then they can continue down that path to meet their needs, because we never know who's coming and going. So we have to also rely on each other to make those connections for those families.
And I think the Reid Mobile has been a really exciting tool for this, to bring this. That's a very tangible and visual example of us coming together, and I think has been able to draw in foster parents and child care providers and people from the community about, come in, this is a welcome space, we want to engage with you, and lots of different people have skin in the game with that vehicle, and it's been an exciting way to connect all of us into the community and just bring everybody's presence in the lives of kids together in one kind of visual piece.
I could really see the Reid Mobile becoming just kind of a tool for many of us to use as something that could go out into a neighborhood where other service providers could be there. I had experience when I worked in Dakota County one year where I was able to do recruitment in the summer for Head Start by being, with they had a similar vehicle, and others were there, and it was kind of a one-stop shop for parents rather than having parents depend on maybe hearing something from somebody else for referral or from their neighbor. There was one place to go. It was a tractor spot. Maybe lunch was provided, activities for children, and it was fun. Word spread, and it was a good tool.
I will say, with the launch of the Reid Mobile, I feel one area that isn't covered in all of our charts, and it's something that we all work towards, is building trust with the families in our community. And with the Reid Mobile, we're able to go into communities where there may be issues of trust and slowly build relationships. We've started visits in March, and we're just now starting to connect with the parents of some of the children we see, because it does take a while. I was working with another organization about a potential partnership this summer, and they said it takes about 30 contact hours for a child to trust you. And I look at doing weekly visits with a Reid Mobile, and we are just now getting to 30 hours of contact with some of our kids that we see regularly. And so I feel, because we are starting that, we are putting trust in the parents are putting trust in us, but we're also putting trust in them, and creating a two-way street to help educate our children so they have success, and we're seeing where gaps are, where needs need to be met.
From an outcome standpoint around the Reid Mobile, are there targets that specific service is sort of targeting around outcomes, and the target audience, I guess, that it's directed to?
I would say when we launched the vehicle, our target audience was ages 0 to 5 and their parents, family, and caregivers, because we wanted to be able to have a service that matched what we do in our libraries to provide early childhood literacy and social and emotional activities, but for families who were unable to make it to the library. I feel we are still trying to reach those families, and we're beginning to see younger children, but we actually had more success as an off-site summer reading program, connecting with siblings K to 8 beginning readers who are still within that target demographic of, if our benchmark is that third grade reading level, we are still seeing families in that area, and we're starting to see the younger families, younger siblings as well, who come with. But as for outcomes, we're still obviously, our goal is happy, successful, and that third grade benchmark is kind of where we're starting. We are still working on developing our outcomes as we're going into communities. We're still trying to flesh out what our program looks like, because we've been active for 8 months now. So, and I feel the next couple of years we'll really have more fluidity in our programming to see how do we support screenings, how do we support public health, how do we support childcare, how can we come along with our partners in our organizations, and do we develop an outcome together that we all work on with using this vehicle as one method of delivery.
Can we look at page 24?
Yes.
So I'm just curious about the data. Can you tell me more about what's going on here? Because it seemed like there was a significant change in 2017.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'm Tracy. I am the Memory Parent social worker. Two of the biggest changes that have happened, first and foremost, there isn't as many minor parents as there were many years ago, so that is one of the biggest changes. And then there was staff change in the middle of 2015 towards the end of 2015. So I think me looking at whether something started as a strength or a need with a different lens than what the other worker did might indicate some of that change.
Tracy, is there any specific focus on early learning in the work that is happening with minor parents? Like, are there special components of your work directed at early learning?
I would say one of the 11 areas that we rank for a need or a strength for the minor mothers is education. So we're trying to work very hard to make sure that they can stay in school and graduate. Doesn't always happen, but a lot of the other strengths add to that to make it possible for them to stay in school. So there's that piece. I have a pretty strong connection with New Beginnings, a school in Chaska for pregnant and parenting teens, and they offer childcare in their building and Head Start and a lot of like those wraparound services for the children of the minor parents. And then I would say also the majority of minor parents that I work with attend that school, but not all. And over the last few years, I have been able to engage and create stronger relationships with the other schools where the parents are going to try and make sure all of those needs are met in other settings if they don't attend the school in Chaska.
Nice, thanks.
And I think that this is a perfect example to me of awareness and us kind of communicating with each other, because one of the biggest things that has an impact on my particular field is scholarships, Think Small Scholarships, and Think Small Scholarships is run through the state, but it's scholarships that families can get in support of even having childcare assistance for childcare costs for early childhood programs. And minor families are actually given a priority if you are in high school or don't have your degree or or working towards that. They're given a priority as to receiving scholarship funding. So scholarships are a pretty important piece that we're very excited about, because it allows access to families who really struggle with having access to quality programs, because they have to be a 4-star parent aware rated program to be able to get the scholarship. So it's proven quality programs that the children are attending as well too. So
I'd have to add to that too that the scholarships are huge within our county. Both all the private and public folks know about that, so there's a lot of referrals. We have, I think 4 years ago, we had 5 4-star parent aware centers or sites. And now within a 10-mile radius, which does kind of go up to Eden Prairie and Chaska, we have over 100. So that's huge. We've added new child cares and preschools into Scott County over the past couple years. I'd have to say that 35% of our students at the Central Family Center in Shakopee schools qualify and receive a scholarship. So without that state funding and that sort of thing, we would have lost those kiddos for sure right off the top. Are there more things we can do? Yeah, you know, if all districts and counties qualified for voluntary pre-K funds or school readiness plus funds, we could transport all kids to sites and have them have opportunities that don't have them right now. So yay for the state for scholarships.
And in the family child care space, we're seeing more scholarships in that realm as well. The 4-star rating system is a little bit harder for family child cares to obtain, simply because the amount of work to get a 4-star. It is better to have more staff on site in order to do all of that work. As a single proprietor of family child care, that becomes more prohibitive. But there is still scholarship dollars aware for lower star rating, and we continue to see a growth in that in family child care. It's not required for family child care licensing. It goes above and beyond minimum standards. And I would say it's really exciting to see the growth that providers are pursuing in their own businesses, because they realize that they want to be strategic partners in the community and with the lives of kids. And again, knowing that they don't necessarily need to have those stars in order to get clients, but they want to do that because they're invested in the lives of kids and in their business. So, you know, we continue to bring that up. It's not, again, required by licensing, but we continue to partner closely with CAP Agency, who they have parent-aware coaches, and make sure that they have access to that information if they want to pursue it.
We've been open for 2.5 months now, and I would say I'm already at, like, of the children that I have, probably about 80% of them are on scholarship. They would not be able to attend my center if they didn't have that support. So,
the scholarships are a great partnership with state dollars and local dollars and programs. With the Head Start families I'm currently working with in Shakopee, 9 of them have received that state scholarship this year and now are able to work. If they didn't receive that scholarship, you know, most of them are on the waiting list for county assistance for their child care, and, you know, so they can't work or can't go to school, and it's really been able to move people ahead, because, you know, there's probably nothing better for a family or a child than to have the family have somebody who has living wage employment. Because that takes a lot of other risk factors out of the picture if they have a wage that's good enough. So the scholarships have been wonderful, and I think it's really made many of us more aware of the good programming that's out there in child care in our area, and it's what parents of young kids need.
And CCAP funding is a continued issue for child care, because the rates haven't changed for years, and the availability of it. I mean, so many families are on waiting lists. It's like years for them to be able to even get child care assistance. So scholarships has been a nice, at least, gap to be able to help families find child care, for them to be able to work, and even consistency in care for the children. So
in addition to prioritizing minor parents, they prioritize people in poverty.
Yep. We've even seen it, you know, in the child protection space, where people who are in foster care, kids who are coming in, especially with kinship placements, are able to tie into those scholarships, which really helps that new placement stay stable, and the kids can kind of stay stationary with where they're at with their caregivers, which again we know is important. We want to keep those trusted relationships that are safe in place, and so that scholarship has been a key factor in that space too.
Which has been shocking to me, the amount of foster care that we've been families that in foster care that we've been providing care for in the past, not even 2 years, has increased so much, even in my field, and other child care providers in my company. It's out there more often than I think people realize, that those kids need to have that stability, and that provides that for them. So,
may I? Thanks. So I'm Lisa Pollard with the Scott County Library. And I just want to point out that we're also just really trying to identify some gaps. So acknowledging the great job that child care licensing does and scholarships, you know, the movement we have towards getting those kids into quality programs, you still have a lot of families who are using family, friends, and neighbor networks for their kids. So your neighbor down the street takes care of your kids while you're gone. They're not licensed. And our new learning and outreach specialist, Moises de la Torre, has made huge strides in contacting Spanish-speaking FFNs, friends, family, neighbor, and he is having his first training for them on December 3rd. So when you're unlicensed, you don't have any training opportunities, you don't have any training requirements, and so being able to have the trust of that community to offer a training in their language and make progress towards getting them more training and getting them more resources.
And creating literacy-rich environments to go along with that. Combining his role as public health and CHIP funded. He is a hybrid position, partially funded through the library and partially funded through CHIP. And so he's been able to combine the interests of safe, healthy, livable environments for families, along with the early literacy aspects that the library focuses on.
Panel?
So I had a question on slide 26. So a couple of things here. One, see a pretty significant difference in the percent improvement between 2016 and 2017. How much of that is being driven by caseloads? Because you see a pretty significant difference in the caseloads from 2016 to 2017. And then do we do anything to track these children and the parents after they're done with the short-term home visiting to see their success and this long-term success of these programs?
Yeah, so that would be our question. This is specific to our home visiting programs, and the part that's a bit tricky about this data is we have some who came in, these are different status ratings over time. Some came in and made no progress, some backslide, some have made significant progress, so you sort of see overall a trend, and they're not necessarily the same groups, it's not the same cohort, it's people coming in and out. So, but we're pleased to see the improvement overall. I would say for some of our long-term benchmarks, we don't currently follow them. There's hope in some of the future data sharing that we'd be able to track, but we look to how are kids doing at early childhood screening, how are they doing on developmental milestone checkpoints and things like that. But we know that early on, these foundational things will impact all of the measures that we're all wanting to look at. So.
And do you think caseload has anything to do with the difference in impact? So for most of these where you see a significant spike, there's also a significant drop off in the number of participants. So is that a factor of more attention being able to be paid, more visits, or?
It may be a more representative of the unique concern or area of focus that the family brings forth.
Okay.
Because that's how this rating happens, is there's like a holistic assessment that happens, and we rate a status at the beginning. We also look at knowledge and behavior in the same way, but not every family will have an area of focus on all of these. Mm-hmm. So they're rated based on where their greatest needs are. Okay. So that creates more variability. Right. More so than I think. I mean, caseload, as far as it's unique to the mix of families that it is.
Can we go back? I'd like to direct a question to Jake and Allie. Knowing that the Reid Mobile is a new program, new investment, I wonder, we talked a little bit about some of the positives that you're seeing early on. I wonder if you could talk about like as you look out into next year or 2 years out, like what are the biggest challenges for the Reid Mobile in terms of reaching the kids and families that you want to reach?
I wrote a little list actually of, I want to applaud the success of what we've done through our partnerships, through the committee that formed the Reid Mobile, that helped design the curriculum, that helped look at how we reach families. It was really a team effort, and the fact that we've done 120 visits since March, with 2 part-time staff and through assistance of public health coming aboard, Leslie made a visit with us as well. But just we realized our capacity is based upon building and gaining trust. That takes so much more time than we initially thought. We initially had planned that it would be 12-week visits and then we would move on to a new community. But at the end of 12 weeks, we're just starting to build that trust and to see families and to have new people come up and go, this is a great service. We need to tell more people about it. And we had someone tell us last night, and we have been going there for 20 weeks. So we are still just getting the word out by being present in the community, by being a regular space. Expanding capacity to go to more areas. Our visits vary between 60 minutes and 2 hours, but we want to reach out to further communities, looking at how we develop partnerships to provide additional staffing. I am part-time on the Reid Mobile. Moises is also part-time, and a lot of our time is spent doing administrative duties, borrowing books, loading the vehicle, unloading the vehicle, doing a safety check every single time we go out, driving to a location. And how do we consolidate that time and effort or we are practical with those services? Because a visit varies according, and it really does require 2 staff people. When we go out, just to give you a quick snapshot of what it looks like, we'll pre-check the vehicle, which takes about 15 to 20 minutes, drive to our location depending on where we're going, and we've been to most of the communities in Scott County. We've been to Elko, Spring Lake, Prior Lake, Savage, Shakopee, and Jordan. We are working on Belle Plaine. We have a plan. But we set up the vehicle. We have kids who are returning books. One of us will be working with kids, returning books, helping them select books. We'll assist with homework after school. We'll be talking about what books do they want to read that they aren't seeing. We'll ask how school went. They'll play a game. Yesterday they created a restaurant and worked on prices and wrote out menus and talked about what healthy foods were and what delicious foods were. The dessert menu was amazing. I will preface with that. It was very difficult to choose. But they're making selections. They're working on their literacy skills, pre-literacy and developing further. They're looking, and one of us will be doing that. One of us will be talking, making sure that they have a snack for after school because some have food stability issues. So we just provide an open snack through donations. And that is part of it. Having funds for books we have a great collection for families to borrow, but as we do one-stop events or as we do programming during the summer, we like to include books that they are able to keep. And we were lucky enough to receive a generous donation from the Cider Foundation, which gave 1,500 books that we were able to donate to give out, and 1,000 of them have found a home since June. But we will need more books as we do more one-stop visits. How do we, I think, looking at how we model our service, there is such an emphasis on screening. Is there a way that we can use the Reid Mobile for that? Is a conversation that we've started having. How do we come alongside some of our partners, such as ECFE or child care centers? Is the Reid Mobile the best vehicle for this model, or is there a different way that we can partner while still providing learning and outreach? These are kind of the areas where I'd like to see us develop further.
Okay, thank you. How do you determine, like I hear that you've been in each of the communities with Belle Plaine to come. Are you targeting specific areas in those communities, and is there data that would help inform, like this is a neighborhood that would have increased access? Should we target that particular area?
Yes, that's the short answer. To expand upon that, when we were doing in-home childcare visits, which was really fun, but also very challenging because winter in neighborhoods and 32-foot vehicle and parking and safety. That's an area we looked at location to the library is the Reid Mobile is great for families who are unable to make it to the library due to access. So we look at their location to a library. I'd like to be able to utilize GIS to look at some additional factors. We look kind of at school districts, and we look where are we within school districts, and look at free and reduced lunches and test scores. We're able to pull up that information, and that's determined where we go. We look at where there's a large population of communities, so we're looking for apartment complexes, manufactured home communities, places where we will see a lot of people who will probably have children in our demographics. In addition to that, we look at organizations such as Shakopee Community Assistance and the CAP agency with WIC, who are also reaching families, and try to provide an open service there once a week, so they can come in and as a way to promote literacy along with additional services. Thanks.
Yeah, I would add, if we take it back to the third grade reading rate that we're looking at as sort of a key indicator for this whole system and how we're doing. And if you're comfortable generalizing, it's not that difficult then to step back community by community or district by district and look at what we talked about earlier. Okay, if you break down third grade reading by students on free and reduced lunch, students for whom and families for whom English is a second language, you can start to break it into smaller groups. And Scott County is small enough that just by talking to people and by observation, you might be able to figure out where some of those people who fit those smaller demographic categories live or go to shop, and have the Reid Mobile try to show up there, which is what we've tried to do. So some of the higher density manufactured home parks throughout the community, those are, I think, easy places to make a connection that, oh, it might make sense for the Reid Mobile to show up there. I think one of the challenges is we also want to provide the service to other people who might want the service to be provided to them. So school districts, we've had elementary schools interested in having the Reid Mobile come to their school, and childcare providers and other places that have the Reid Mobile come here, have the Reid Mobile come there, and I think we generally, that's sort of the library mindset, is we want to share everything with everybody. I think to Chris's earlier question, for me, the big challenge for us over the next 2 to 3 years with the Reid Mobile is, do we have the data to be able to say, this is, if we have limited access, limited hours, resources to put toward this, do we know with a good degree of certainty where those resources should be going? Where should the Reid Mobile be going in the community? And will we actually stick to that? Will we be willing to say, yeah, we're not going to be in the parade, we're not going to do that, we're really truly focused on this one thing that we're trying to achieve? I don't know that we'll do that. I like parades, so we'll be trying to drive the parade. And it's good to get it out in the community, because that's the other piece of this, is making the whole community aware. But then on top of that, we really don't know how, other than it feels good, and the stories are good, and I think if you're in the interaction with a child and a family on the Reid Mobile, it would in some ways seem preposterous to try to measure it, because it's right before your eyes. It's making an impact on this kid, it's making an impact on this family. But that probably shouldn't be good enough if we're providing that service with public funds, and we say we want to improve, but we can't at this point really say improve on what, other than sort of anecdotal qualitative stuff. So over the next 2 years, really digging in and getting a sense of what is it that is happening on the Reid Mobile, what is the impact for the children and families, and can we double down on those things if they're actually making a difference? I think they are, but to be able to point at that, yeah.
So would it be fair to say that's a next step for the Reid Mobile program, that if you were coming back a year from now or 2 years from now, that you'd like to be able to talk to these folks about?
Absolutely.
And I think too, it's kind of a mobile resource. So it has information about other kinds of services. So it's moving around town, and even in our marketing, we've kind of connected things together. So the flyer about the screening, it kind of looks like the bookmobile. So it's really, we want to build literacy and great skills in kids. So if we can kind of extend that within our programs and add that kind of marketing, it's like, oh, I saw that before, I saw that, oh, I saw that. And knowing that we're all in it and working together, it's kind of cool.
Well, I think what we'll do at this point, for some of you who haven't been here yet, we're going to ask the audience if they have questions that they would like to ask. And then we'll also give the chance for the commissioners to ask questions. But unless panel folks have other things you want to ask, could we turn it over to the audience?
I'm just kind of curious, talked about the Reid Mobile a little bit, but just in terms of next steps for the entire group, what do you see as kind of your next steps around future collaboration?
I'll start. The one that I put the highest priority on is the data sharing and data integration. That we had, it came up through, I think, almost all the questions. It came up in most of the responses that we might know what's going on in our little sliver of this work, but we really don't know what happens after, and we typically don't know what has happened before. I think there's interest among pretty much everybody at the table and some of the folks who aren't at the table to find a way to make that happen. There's a model in Dakota County. One of our Resilient Communities projects through the University of Minnesota is really working on the legal aspect of what's the easiest way to do that so that we have consent from the families, that we're looking at HIPAA and FERPA and all the other laws that might apply, and finding out how to streamline this so we can share that information to the benefit of children and families and then to the improvement of the programs we provide.
My question is really to all of you, and listening to you, I see one of your biggest challenges in that you have many, many, many different programs that are affected. A lot of you people are all affected, and your interests and your specialties are very diverse. And so how to bring them all together and share your information is one of your largest challenges. So hearing that, I was thinking about, have you considered breaking some of that into smaller components to make maybe larger strides, such as maybe a Kaizen event, bringing forward maybe some parents that are involved with each of those, whatever the Kaizen event is directed toward, to better understand each of your roles and getting a parent's input as to how they feel maybe your focus should be put in order to make larger strides or have larger outcomes.
It's a good part of just talking specifically about the live, learn, earn aspect of us working together. We have done events where we gathered people together to get community input. And we always continue to look at ways that we can do that, as well as continue to look at ways to have as many people as we can be a part of this group. It's not limited to just us, it's anyone can be involved in it. So I think we're always looking at different ways to outreach and bring people to the table that we think are going to have a valuable voice, which definitely it is not just providers in childcare or people who work specifically in early childhood, it's the families as well. So we want that community input. So one of the goals that we are working towards upcoming next, because we're to the point where we're starting to do actionable items in our process, is who do we need at the table, and how can they bring a stronger voice, more overall well-rounded voice to the work that we're going to be doing. So yes, it's definitely conversations that we're having. We're just trying to figure out how to get that message out there.
Can I add to that? Hi everyone, I'm Tanya Ward. I'm a clinical psychologist and supervisor at the Mental Health Center, and I've been on this committee that we're speaking about. And I don't know if this will answer your question, but I can tell you through our thought process, that's really been something that I've been proud of this group, is that they've always thought about how we can have all these resources, but how are we going to have the parents use them, and that the parents, you know, the child's best resource is their parent or their caregiver. And so if we can just kind of maybe shift how parents see using these, that it actually comes through them rather than something that's coming, you know, at them or something that they have to do. We already kind of, we add on to their skills and we really empower them, you know, by saying things like, you know,
over half the brain development is within the first year. And all that takes is you just looking at your child, smiling, because we think it's overwhelming sometimes for parents to have this idea of you need to read, you know, an hour every night or whatever it is. We say, no, while you're folding laundry, talk about the colors. So just kind of reframing how they view this so it's not as, sometimes it can be a little scary for them. So that's definitely throughout our entire conversation we've thought about how do we empower parents and get them part of this. So it's exciting that we're going to continue to bring them to the table and maybe have events like you're talking about.
We're challenging Mary Keene back there with the microphone going back and forth. I'm sorry about that, Mary.
Thanks for that answer. That was one of my questions. And you know, I've been part of Live, Learn, Earn on the fringes for, I don't know, whatever it's been now, 3 years. And I think what you guys are doing is probably as important or not the most important for moving forward to Mayor Briggs about our future and healthy kids. And we have to have some metrics along the way. But that was one of my questions because I, like Lori, was happy to see at least a start on graph 7. I have been pushing Jake, and he knows that he's laughing over there for what is that list of things we do and what are some of the basic outcomes and what are our investments, because a lot of collective impact is about not having to add more money or put new programs, but the realignment and the coordination. And that you guys are all sitting here tells me even now that we are moving in that right direction and how important that is. And I've even pushing our staff here, you know, Allie did a wonderful job. Watching them in action on that Reid Mobile Moises and Allie that night is really something. But I'm going to push this group to figure out a fundraising February for books. Because these one-stops, we don't have enough books to give out, and it's really hard to collect them. So somewhere, Mayor Briggs, in your, we want to have accomplishments we can do and we can mark. 1,000 books would be really awesome along the way, because that is something that they need and they talked about when we're out in some of these places. So that's something you could do and mark and check the box on, right, that you talk about? The other one is we've got 900 employees at the county, from parks to transit to transportation to health and human services. Every one of us touches. What are those small things when we see a family, or those small things we could talk about, and are we giving them out? And are things that we could do to just support? If this is really important to Scott County, all 900 of us have a voice and we could do something. So are there some things you can give us within the county as well that we can talk about when we're out in the community? In my discussions with the chair and vice chair moving forward, one of their big things was community outreach and being engaged. And so we're going to challenge all of our staff to think about that moving forward, and what are some of those small things we can do at chambers, at Rotaries, all of those types of things moving forward to help coordinate this. Because you've got more than just even your program sitting there that could be a voice for some of this. So I just want to say well done and thank you for your efforts. 3 years ago, we would not have seen any of this. And I know it takes time, but you all are going in the right direction, and this sharing is, it's just incredible. Thank you.
Allie, Jack, could you get me a list of the 1,000 books?
I would actually, instead of having 1,000 titles, even just having the money, because our biggest issue where we want to support families is for families who are using English as a second language. Is one of the most important factors is to celebrate their home language and to encourage reading and writing and talking and singing and playing in their own language. And while I could provide a list of books, it's more if finding the books that support their language and having voices from authors from their own countries and that reflect their own experiences, I feel like that would have a bigger impact.
Here's what I'd suggest, if we can, knowing what, if we can meet somewhere in the middle. So I think one of the things, especially because I'm thinking, and you mentioned it, the various Optimist Club, Rotary, talking about literacy in our county rises to the top of most of these organizations. And their strong desire to demonstrate that they have brought some good to the community. While a check is something they write, I must say if there's some tangible pieces that we can share with them that they can say that they've delivered, we could achieve a bunch, Ally, I think in very, very short order.
Mayor Briggs, I have a document waiting for you that I will email you. Because it goes beyond funds, it goes into how do we create literacy-rich environments in homes. Yep. And so that would be where I think we could work together.
Let's give it a go.
We talked a little bit about outreach. Sometimes we have to come out of our own shell and go to our families to be able to serve them. And I think that's really an open idea for us, and I think that it's really a possible and doable thing. But part of the issues is to do more group settings than an individual home visit and stuff. It's more effective for people to come together and work together and understand she's like me and I'm like her and, you know, those kinds of things. But in our housing, sometimes, like I think of some of the trailer parks and stuff, we don't have a facility where we could have a group of people within that community come together and get support in any other area. One of the things we're working on is a Ready for Kindergarten curriculum. It's through reading.org. And it works with parents with babies, 1s, 2s, 3s, and it's not where they come to 3 sessions and they learn how to use flashcards. It's really understanding your child and how to help them at each step of the way be ready for kindergarten. But for us to go out, we have to have a place to go. You understand? So a lot of the new housing developments will have common areas that are... So, and just thinking of our scale group, affordable housing, when we're thinking about that we have places for people to come together within that community or that living space where more outreach could be available to families. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks. Do we have other audience questions? All right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Brecky, I think you have...
Well, thank you, everybody. I've been part of this group for some time, and it's been wonderful to watch the collaboration, the teamwork from many elements of the community. I do want to, again, just as Leslie did, put some emphasis on this page 7. I think that's great because I feel like all of us here, all of us listening right now, we need to be able to articulate why is government doing this. Even from our philosophy up here, where we're really trying to do only what our role is and spend the taxpayer money most judiciously. This page 7 helps us explain that we already have these programs that we're mandated to do that we're doing for very good reason that have to do with early childhood development. But I'd like to even go a little further on this because I think in our community conversation and helping especially taxpayers understand why we're doing this, we need to even go to some of those metrics about not being able to read by not being screened and not having deficits identified early, not being able to read by 3rd grade level, not graduate from high school, makes it so much more likely that we're going to be on public assistance or spend time across the street not paying, on taxpayer dollars, things like that. I think we need to be able to have that conversation for people who have a hard time understanding why this is a board objective, why this is even here. And by doing that, we can get broader support. I think that's really important. So I challenge us all to do that. I challenge us to develop this piece and use that more as education. And really the data sharing, but through our county services, we're working with individuals and children and families who maybe are very vulnerable and have those deficits. And I think we need to start there and work on, are they being screened? Do they have these opportunities? And making sure, because that's going to be the biggest bang for the buck, and at least that's our job up here, what we're supposed to be achieving. So that wasn't a question. Sorry. I do have one question, though, because we haven't talked about this. One of what's not working well on page 3 talks about the declining number of family child care providers. And I do know that that especially of late in Scott County, we've gotten many additional childcare opportunities and options, but they tend to be in more of our urban areas. I assume that declining family childcare providers is hurting us, especially in more of our rural areas of the county, and because we know it's a more affordable option. I'd love to hear a little bit from Allison quick about what we're doing about that, or what your thoughts are going forward.
Yep. You know, just like you were very concerned about the declining numbers, there's also some misconception about why providers are closing. You know, some may say, oh, it's over-regulation. I would come back and say that when you look at our data for why people close, it's not necessarily that. There's just natural cycles of people coming in and out of the family child care profession. The recession brought a lot of influx into that space as people were losing their jobs. That became kind of a quick hit. Well, I guess I can, you know, just stay home with my kids and do child care. Many found out that was not the easy career that they thought it would be. And you know, and as the economy has recovered, we've seen people naturally go back into their workspaces. Our unit has been strategic this last year about trying to think of how can we open up this as a profession that's more easy to be accessed by our public. And Gretchen can maybe speak to this too, but we're trying to take our information session, which we traditionally have people come into the county for 2 meetings. One is more of a broad introduction to that career, and then there's more of an orientation. And we're hoping in 2019 to take that first piece and put it as an online module, so anybody coming to the county website can explore the profession of family child care, what that would look like in Scott County, and invite them into that process a little bit more smoothly and have their questions be asked, because we want to be bringing down barriers to having them come into that profession. Want to add?
I think, yeah, just trying to kind of utilize the technology we have available to get them some more information. Yeah. Oh, I can project, I think. And as well as just kind of be real as efficient as we can with staff time, because that's the information session is a 2.5 hour chunk of time that staff they have kind of a regular presentation for, but then also just have to get ready for and then kind of process questions and things after. So wanting to, and right now we're required to do it once a month. If we can make it on demand, hopefully that would be, make it just more available to folks, you know, who are sitting at their computer at midnight kind of thinking about that versus, oh, on this day at this time I can go to the county and learn more. Well, you can click and learn more. Let's do it that way.
We're also excited to start having some partnerships with other units. And just in the last month or so, we've been able to put on a training that involved child protection, giving us, our providers, some training around mandated reporting, and then also mental health, coming in and training our providers around provider self-care. Because not only do we want people to come into the profession of family child care, but we want to retain the people who are already there and help support them in that space. And so that's been an exciting movement that we've seen this year about just bringing in that community of Scott County as well to support the people that we have to do that more.
Thanks, Allison.
Commissioner Beer.
This is a BHAG, and just to be clear, big, hairy, audacious goal. But I think, you know, just to be clear, you know, might be, you know, just listening at home. But I think most of the people in this room believe it's also doable for a lot of different reasons. So my question is, and it's the backdrop, Allie, you mentioned common language twice. In the aspect of common language and trying to be on the same page, and Jake's iconic collective impact slide, I don't know why I remember that coming from him, but your arrow slide of maybe arrows coming together and taking each other out versus, you know, kind of working their way in the right direction. You know, there's always a few over in the eddy. But with that as kind of a backdrop, the question was asked, I don't know who asked it over here, but hey, are we all at least on the same page? Are we at least kind of all rowing the same direction? And the body language was, you know, what are you going to... And Jake's answer was, yes, but... And I get it. So the question is, maybe it was just too early when the question was asked. Maybe there's not enough sunlight in the room, or maybe there's a big elephant in the room, or maybe it's none of the above. But how do we, to move this forward, emphasize the yes and minimize the but? And I know there's a lot, and some of it was already answered a little bit earlier, but my big question is, you know, is there an elephant in the room? Because they can be eaten one bite at a time, come with an appetite. Is there a stumbling block that needs to be removed, or is it just, it's so big? Because I'm looking at this table, we got nonprofit, we got profit, we got private, we got public, no one holds the keys to the kingdom. Together we do. So just moving forward, and it is big as much of the stuff is that we do. How do we emphasize the yes and minimize the but?
I do not.
We're all looking at you, Jake. We're all looking at you.
I really don't think there's an elephant in the room.
And that's awesome.
I don't think there's a big issue that we're not talking about, because in my estimation, this group is pretty open with their opinions and pretty direct, pro and con on whatever the issue is, and that's good. That to me is evidence of a healthy table. I think part of it is it's so big. Part of it is, unlike transportation, planning, even health and human services, where most of what health and human services is doing is mandated by a state or federal agency, so everybody in some ways is forced to be on the same page and have language that at least comes from the same book. And they've been doing that for a long time. Transportation, planning and zoning, health and human services, these other systems of work have been working together for decades, if not longer, just to be able to serve their community. To have the roads connect from one city, one county, one state to another, you have to have relationships. I think this system work is so young that we are still getting a sense of what each person in the room does. Are all of the people in the room? Probably not. Who are those people that need to come in? And then the learning of, how do you talk about this? Some of us have mandated, some of us are in the Department of Ed, some of us are in the Department of Human Services, some of us are through the Department of Health, some of us are nonprofits, some of us are families, child care providers, all have our own best practices, all have our own language that we think is the best language. But to be able to bring the people who are actually delivering those programs together in a room, separate from all of those other agencies that try to dictate how we should be talking. It seems pretty, it's big, but it actually seems pretty easy so far to get there, to say, well, we could probably talk about it the same way, or almost the same way, not just so we better understand what we're doing, but ultimately it's for the parents and the children and the caregivers, so that they can all fully understand what's out there, what is important, and what are we all trying to drive toward for their benefit.
I have to say it took a long time, I think, with the 50 by 30. That first year was just really a learning time about each and every one of us. Now, do we have some strategies and some things in place? We do, but we haven't shared those. We talked about public health nursing has an increase in the number of births, but MPH doesn't send the school district the entire list. If we're missing 25 to 30% of families where we could be reaching out and doing some marketing. So along the way, we've found ways to work together and support each other. But it is different language.
It is, and listen, we all work with children, and that's one thing pretty much anyone can be passionate about. So, of course, we're all going to have our reasons why we think what we do is the most important or most impactful, but I think we all also are on the same page of understanding its families, its children, a foundational, strong foundation for their learning, for them to be healthy and safe. And that's something, like, no matter what you do in early childhood, you all can agree upon that. And we all are seeing that in these conversations we can learn from each other instead of competing against each other. And that's something that in early childhood is newer to the field in general. So we're all kind of going through this process together. It's only going to strengthen the work that we're doing and this county and the projects that we're going to be building off of it. So it's a process for all of us. We all impact children in some sort of way, and that's something everybody can feel really strongly about, and that's what makes us good at what we do, because we all feel really strongly about what we do for children. So, of course there's conversations, and some of them have been like I don't want to say heated, but we all have our opinions about what is,
passionate.
passionate. We all have our opinions about what is best for children, but we all are very open to hearing each other and how we can work together to make an impact. And I do think that is providing ways to let families be successful, and truly when it comes to early childhood education, that literacy component and educating families is huge. It's a lot about educating families and educating the community about how early childhood can make a positive impact for families and for children. And even as Commissioner Brecky said, long term, like people not being in jail and having higher graduation rates and success as an adult because they're prepared for adulthood as well too. And that all starts when they're little, and all the work that all of us do together. So I wouldn't say there's a big elephant in the room. It's just a lot of passionate people who feel really strongly about the impact that we have on families and learning how to work together. So
one example would include early childhood screening and looking at the possibilities of, right now it's housed within the districts, the school districts, and so getting those districts together, which we have a couple times, but also thinking creatively in the community. Can we go out to different places and screen kids? Can kids come into the county and be screened using the tool with public health nursing and things like that? So those light bulbs and those, how did you do that? That thing are coming together.
Yeah.
It's coming together.
Yes.
I think I have an elephant in the room, actually.
Oh,
I'm so sorry,
no.
I do.
Oh, no.
Well, and it's just, as we're having this conversation, we've identified 2 key benchmarks, which is 3rd grade reading level and getting children screened by 3. But if we look at childhood development, so much brain development occurs between 0 and 3 that there is that elephant in the room of, is there an earlier benchmark that we can create? And as we were sitting here talking, I realized I just want to take a moment and thank Terry for running the Follow Along program, because I feel that is one of the things the county does. Terry Furman runs the Follow Along program, and that connects families with children ages 0 to 3 and does the ASQ3, does a screening at vital points so they're able to make referrals. But do we need to create a benchmark that's even before age 3 if this is when most of brain and healthy child development is so vital to success? And I think it's going to keep getting younger and younger. So I'm sorry, I think there might be an elephant in the room that I just thought about.
And can I say, that was brought up at a scale meeting here, I don't know, about 6 months ago or a year ago. If kids are learning so much between whatever ages, before 5 or 6, whatever, why not send them to school? I hate to say, but at 3, we send them to daycares at 3 or 6 months, right? Send them to school and cut off the junior and senior year, because that senior year is, let's be honest, that's almost worthless, right? I mean, we're going to go to school today, but we're going to, yeah, I know. Anyway. You're right, but I just think it breaks down to one word, and you see it with a lot of people. Well, how do you become successful in whatever? How do you become a doctor? How do you read? Just that simple. Just read. So, and I see one person back there again.
I also have an elephant. It's a small elephant, though, and it's conversations that I think we have had. Funding. That is an issue. We have a lot of great ideas. I would love to be able to provide books in every single home for kids in Scott County, but that takes dollars. Through our conversations, however, we have been able to leverage some existing dollars. For example, just by having conversations and hearing how people talk a little bit differently, we were able to leverage some dollars through SHIP by supporting some of these efforts. We were able to get some dollars through St. Francis to support some of these efforts. So learning how you guys talk about it, how we talk about it, I joke all the time, that's public health with a little p, little h, because it's all for children and well-being. So how can we have mandates, we have restrictions, but by being able to tweak some of our language, we're able to leverage some of those dollars. We don't have enough dollars. I think we would love to try and find some more. We've done some joint grant applications that are able to provide some additional resources, but we would love to be able to buy whatever we need to make kids successful, but we do have some limitations.
Okay, Gary.
And just a completely different topic now, but going back to the broadband access that the mayor brought up and some others talked about, one of the things that I'd like to suggest is the county has actually entered into an agreement with a provider and a group to do engineering regarding how we use our fiber backbone and some of our broadband assets. That a portion of that is specifically geared at getting broadband access to lower income families in, how can we use and leverage our assets to bring the cost down for lower income families, and also are there areas that we need to target because they have too small of a broadband connection? So it's not that they don't have access, but they don't have a big enough pipe. I think that's kind of what the mayor was alluding to, that this household didn't have a big enough pipe to accommodate both the work-at-home dad and the kids being on the broadband at the same time. And so, I'm going to assume it's you, Jake, but correct me if I'm wrong. While we were here, I was texting back and forth with that company, looking to get their two head people, the person who's doing the engineering and then the person who's working on the programmatic side of it, because I think it would be beneficial if they came out and met with you. They've been trying to get information from me on where are there areas, are there pockets? Is it setting something up in a mobile home park that allows people, or is it something broader than that? I know that they have already deployed a couple of very successful wireless functions in a couple of parts of the county that were underserved, that added big wireless pipes to some housing areas in some real rural portions of our county. So would it be appropriate for you, Jake? Because they both indicated that they'd be happy to come out and meet with this group and talk specifically about how do we get broadband to areas where you have kids that need access but don't have good access, either because of finances or because the infrastructure is not there, because it could be both.
Yeah, I'm happy to be the point person for that, with input from probably just about every person in the room on where those people are who need the services.
I just wanted to piggyback on Allie's elephant and something that Leslie said about the little things we can do. And I don't know that we've named it, but I think one of the underlying values and principles or things we can focus on along with literacy-rich environments is building resiliency in our families and in our kids. That there are tons of little things we can all do every day to do that, that's going to lay that foundation and move things up earlier so that kids are more prepared, families are more prepared. So maybe it's spending a little more time and effort on building resiliency in our communities. We've had some opportunities around the adverse childhood experiences. I know the Healthcare Collaborative is looking at working with providers, surveying providers on their screening of ACEs. Maybe if we could someday measure the resiliency of our kids, we'd really know how we've moved the dial. That will impact all those other things.
I agree with that.
And I think it's pointing out to the parents that you already have your number one resource.
Yeah.
It only takes one. It only takes one healthy attachment to an adult, and it can be anybody. And a kid will overcome, in basic terms, ACEs, in simple terms. It just takes one adult, one healthy attachment. So if we can just tell parents, you're already it, I think that really helps, build that resiliency, and also, makes them feel like I am worth it. I am doing a good job as a parent. Because, I found in my work that that's the best intervention with kids is working with the parent. I'm sure you guys know that too, but especially with that early age, parents have a lot of anxiety. Am I doing this right? Well, I don't look like that family. It's like, nope, you're doing great.
That was an interesting one, because that's one of our community indicators we've been looking at, is the percent of kids in the community say they're connected to adults, right? And I know it's hard for us maybe to relate to at times, but I go back to my experience, and I had 3 coaches and somebody from church. I could probably name 15 adults who impacted me positively growing up. And if 40% of our kids are saying they don't have that one person in our community. What is that saying, and how do our programs align with that? To me, that's a pretty big indication, and you just hit on it, just that one person and that impact that can have. And so how does this align with that as kids are growing up? It seems that's another thing that we should be talking about. I thought that was pretty interesting, because that is one of our community indicators the board has been looking at. And how do our programs align with seeing things like that happen?
Somebody mentioned a bit ago that maybe the parents should be involved, and that's what I would like to see going forward. I mean, if we continue to meet, if there's a group that's really an organized group of professionals, I think we're really missing the boat if we don't ask the question of the parents about what do you need to make things better in your parenting world and better for your children. I mean, they're the people who are living in the trenches and know, the struggles. And so I hope that if a group like this continues, or there's still this effort, that there would be people in the community that would be asked for a couple of reasons. I think it would empower those particular people, and it would make a difference, and then that would maybe move on to their community, to their group, and they'd be the messenger.
Good deal. Anybody else? Okay, great topic, great discussion. Let's give everybody a hand.